First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to present this case study, which is on traditional knowledge in disaster risk management. So, if you can go to the slides. Yes. So we know that disasters are on increase, and cultural heritage is actually increasingly vulnerable to disasters. We have examples from around the world. As you can see, this very important fort in Bhutan, which is no longer like this. It's damaged by fire last year, and it completely got destroyed. We also have examples of increasing floods, which have been, in fact, causing a lot of damage to historic cities. And this is an example of Ayutthaya, a World Heritage Site, which got flooded, in fact, 2 years ago, and a lot of damage was done to its material fabric. Christchurch Cathedral, which got damaged due to earthquake in 2010, and Christchurch actually lost one of its symbols. And there's a big debate about what to do with this. So there are these increasing challenges that we are facing, where heritage is becoming vulnerable, and increasing climate change impacts are in fact making heritage even more vulnerable, because many heritage sites are made of materials that are no longer able to withstand this higher frequency of rainfall. For example, in this case, this big cloudburst in Leh in India actually damaged a lot of vernacular heritage of the region, which was not used to that kind of extreme temperature and extreme climate changes. Now the question that I pose in my case study is whether we should look at cultural heritage as only a victim, or it should be seen as an asset for disaster risk reduction. And the cases that I'm going to present are presenting this other way of looking at heritage, not just as something which is weak, vulnerable, but as something that is an asset, that is a resource. Now how it becomes a resource, I'm going to show some examples. The first one is from an earthquake that happened in the western part of India in 2001, which killed more than 20,000 people and injured many, many more, as you can see from the figures here. Now, what we found in that disaster was that modern buildings, the modern concrete buildings, just fell down and killed a lot of people, because they just fell down like pack of cards. Also, many poorer traditional constructions just collapsed, like in a way that killed many people. But there was an interesting thing that we found. There were some survivors in from that earthquake. And what were those survivors? Just have a look at some of those examples. A big survivor was this kind of construction, which was developed by indigenous people of this region, who had been constructing this for ages. And because of its form and because of its construction, which was studied by scientists later, when they realized the importance of it, figured out that actually that traditional construction has a lot more to contribute to earthquake resistance than many modern constructions. And that was never realized, but it would actually be seen in that real test that happened with that earthquake. And it was not only that. This is another example where in the old city of Ahmedabad, again, what was found was that many old constructions had those principles that were followed in modern constructions for earthquake resistance already existing. For example, these wooden beams, which make them very, very good, perform very well against an earthquake. And what was very interesting to find was that people started to move back to that old part of the city after the earthquake. People were leaving before, and then they suddenly realized, well, our houses which were old, which were perceived to be old and outdated, actually are much better. And then people started to kind of revert back to that area. Another little example is from Kashmir in 2005, where again similar thing happened. A lot of these constructions which were done in concrete just fell down, but what we found was these constructions in fact withstood that earthquake very well. And the reason was because through trial and error, through experimentation by people over generations that created that culture and that utilized those local resources, people had created a system that could actually perform much better to that disaster, because they were used to this earthquake happening after every 50 years. So they had that knowledge and wisdom, which unfortunately was missed in these new constructions, We didn't look back at what had been gained over centuries. Now I want to give you another example, and this is to look at risk from flood and soil erosion in this island in the eastern part, in the northeast. This is one of the largest river islands, and what's happening is a lot of erosion is happening, and the island is actually breaking apart. It's kind of losing its integrity. Now the problem has been that it's not a question of climate change here. It's not a question of something which is natural. It is actually a result of man-made human intervention, because a dam being constructed on the other side is actually creating a lot of erosion on this side. It's not that only that construction of dam is the problem. When one looks at the way people have been managing that island traditionally, and that's where it links to the environmental management, people were actually using very, very local systems, very, very simple systems, by which they would collect the clay. They would not make a very strong embankment or walls, but they would just collect the clay, and that clay they would use for making pottery. So that pottery would serve the livelihoods of the people, and in that case they would also prevent that island from getting disintegrated. Now, no longer that kind of approach is being utilized by people who are now more and more relying on modern constructions, modern embankments, and that actually doesn't help, really. Also, one finds in the same island, the kind of vernacular architecture uses bamboo and is very much designed to withstand flooding, because it is built on stilts. So the water could just flow in. And another advantage was that people could move. So if flood was happening in one area, they would move their house to the other area. So the whole way people were living, their culture, and that's the relation between culture and environment that is seen here very much strongly, is so much embedded in people's life that and their architecture. And what's happening now? Just see, they are replacing that bamboo with concrete. And the problem with that is that you are no longer having that flexibility that would be there in a bamboo construction, and actually the same area which is prone to flooding is also very highly earthquake prone area, and you make the same construction much higher vulnerable to earthquake and not really helping the real purpose by which the vernacular construction were designed, to live with nature. Also, you see that the kind of bridges that were being constructed in that island were very flexible. The people would move the bridges as the flood water will flow. But what is happening now is that people are changing those bridges to concrete superstructures, which you would not be able to kind of move them as the flood would, or the water with the water flow. And of course, this is creating a problem that when there is a flood on one side, the river level, the land level of land changes, and so you are not able to move the structure. So it becomes on a low-lying area, and it gets flooded. So what you see here is that because you are not understanding the way traditional cultures had actually learned to live with nature, to live with risks, and you are always fighting with risks. And that kind of system is, in fact, even making a lot of heritage in that area. Manuscripts, monasteries, becoming increasingly vulnerable to floods. Every year, a lot of these very important manuscripts get destroyed because of this. So the lesson we are really learning is that we are always fighting with risks, but the lesson that we learn when we look at culture and nature together is that actually you can really live with risks. And you need to actually adapt these traditional coping practices. Another example that I would like to present here is from Nepal. This is another village, and you can see that the village is lying in an area which is very fertile. So there are green areas around it. The village is very confined to a small area. It's very dense. It has also a lot of open spaces within the village. But what you see as an important thing is that the village is in fact defined by rituals, by paths, which in fact prevents the village to expand. So village densified in itself, and in that way it preserved the agricultural land around it. And that agricultural land was making people survive for generations. It was their source of livelihood. So there was a system, there was an ecological system that kept this village and sustained this village and its inhabitants for generations. But what you see now is that there is no control on how new development happens. So all that land that served people, that was part of their livelihoods, and it also had their emotional attachment is no longer their land, it's just a commodity to be sold. And in that way, you are in fact creating a lot of disaster risks with the loss of, with this kind of development. So the point that one kind of gets from these examples is there is a loss of traditional knowledge systems, and that's increasing vulnerability of communities to disaster. And that means that there are loss of local skills and human resources. There is increased dependence due to on outside, due to lesser use of locally available resources. There's also loss of assets for sustainable livelihoods, such as land. There is increasing economic affordability. There is an unaffordability of the marginalized, because they are no longer able to sustain on the resources that they are no longer able to afford by themselves. And of course, there is a climatic unsuitability, because there is more energy intensive use. So you can see that these examples really show how culture and environment together really tell you that why disaster risks are increasing and what can we do in order to really reduce the vulnerability. Now, there's another two things that I want to point here, and that's about harnessing potential of cultural heritage for emergency preparedness and response. Again, an example to say that heritage should be seen as an asset. It has a quality to it that will help you to reduce vulnerability. It's not just something very poor. Just an example, there are traditional water systems in many cities. There are wells that have drawn on the groundwater, and the water has been replaced because of the way the local ecology functions. Now these become very important as traditional as emergency supply systems. You can no longer rely. The problem now is we rely a lot on electricity. So you want water to be pumped in, but if a disaster happens, it's the locally available resource that's going to be of immediate use to you rather than drawing something from outside. So you see that example, and again, rather than always thinking of expanding roads to increase access, in fact, you can realize that a lot of open spaces that you find in traditional cities are in fact the refuge areas if disaster happens. If you try to see them in that perspective, you would not just think of replacing them and creating huge roads, big roads, but you would actually utilize these spaces, and you would see that they would actually create a very important source for emergency preparedness. And then the point about utilizing traditional management systems for emergency preparedness and response. We always rely on these external management systems where there would be an institution who would take care of you if there is a disaster. But in fact, the communities have their established systems, and you can utilize those very systems that are already existing, as in this case of Shirakawa-go in Japan, where the community itself had a way of organizing themselves to take care of the fire that may happen in their village. So that's the system that is being utilized now for maintaining this water guns to prevent fire. So the same system is being utilized to also take care of fire prevention. So rather than drawing on some external systems, you can actually build on traditional systems, and religious institutions play a very important role, and that's again a link with culture. It becomes very strong in case of disaster. And the last thing where culture plays a role is in disaster recovery, and that can be seen in examples after examples that culture, when not considered, actually create situations like these, where you may create these structures which would be abundant. People would not move in them, because these are the structures which are not associated with the way people live, and they are created in areas where there is no link with the local ecology. So people would not be able to survive there. You may provide them a little shade or shelter, but people will move away from there. You will also find that if you move people from their traditional source of water, if these are not utilized, people will have long queues to look for water, but you would not be utilizing those water systems that are already available. And that's where again you can utilize traditional systems. We have also found a lot of examples that culturally sensitive reconstruction actually enables you to really sustain in the long term. As an example here, this house was created, this kind of construction was created by thinking that people would be able to build on it, and you can see that how people built on it. They actually created something which was what their culture allowed them to do, and the enabling mechanism helped them to actually create something which help them survive. So building on people's ability to adapt and bring back the cultural identity is very, very important. So I would end here. These were the few case studies that I wanted to present to really highlight how important it is to look at heritage as an asset for disaster risk management. Thank you.